Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. Got another Master Duel video for you. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about deck building, actually. Not something that I usually get into, but I wanted to sort of talk about some of the more common mistakes that people make when they are building their deck. I feel like a lot of people tend to make misplays actually at the deck building stage, which sabotages their own chances of winning before the duel has even begun. So I really want to talk about some common mistakes and again, how we can avoid those. I also want to show with each of these examples, not just a deck list that's kind of making this mistake, but also in turn, how that affects the gameplay in an example game. So we're going to see a few different examples of that. Before we get started though, up top, gotta give a huge thanks to our YouTube members and Patreon subscribers. Could not do this without you all. They're all thanked at the end credits of every video, and if you want to see content like this early, definitely join as a YouTube member down below. The join button is next to subscribe. If you're interested in seeing some content like extra replays, new card reviews, tournament breakdowns that we don't have time to cover here on the channel, I post that kind of content over on patreon.com/hexlex. That's all exclusive content over there. None of it is, uploaded over here to YouTube. So if you want to see content early, join as a member. If you want to see exclusive content, head over to patreon.com/hexlex. Either way, I super appreciate the support. Now, let's get into it. Okay, so the first example that we're going to be taking a look at today is a Blue Eyes deck that I played against relatively recently. It was actually a replay that I showed here on YouTube in another video. We're going to be revisiting that replay with some new context, but first we're taking a look at the deck list that I was up against. Now, before we start talking about it, does anyone at a glance know what is wrong with this deck list? So the answer is that we're playing cards like Raigeki and Evenly Matched, even though this is a deck that very much wants to go first. Now I can already hear, what some of you might be thinking or saying, but Hex, even though this deck wants to go first, it's still fine to play a card like Evenly Matched. Just in case you go second, you need to have some kind of backup, right? Well, wrong, I actually think. Not that the idea of wanting to have cards in case you go second is wrong, but we have those. Those are called hand traps. The thing about Evenly and Raigeki is that these cards are only good when you go second. And therein lies the overarching deck building misplay that I think is happening here. Our opponent is deck building planning for things going wrong instead of things going right. They're putting these cards in their deck, I'm presuming, obviously I don't know this person, I'm not in their brain, I don't know what's going on in there, but presumably a lot of the reason you want to play cards like these in a deck that wants to go first is, well, in case I go second, right? In case things go wrong, in case they have a board I need to break. And I think especially in best of one Master Duel Ranked Ladder, you cannot be deck building with that in mind, right? Because the other thing about a card like Evenly Matched or Raigeki is that not only do these only address an issue when they go second, they also only address an issue once they've already hit the board. And boards, especially in 2026 Yu-Gi-Oh, are going to be so much more difficult to clean up, with a card like Evenly or Raigeki. The average end board can easily negate or play through or circumvent somehow this type of effect. Again, as I mentioned before, we are actually playing cards in case we go second or in case things go wrong. Those are our hand traps like Ash Blossom, Maxi, Joel Knockbird, etc. So what's the difference, right? Well, the difference is that these cards are actually useful going first as well. Even in a deck like Blue Eyes, or rather especially in a deck like Blue Eyes, you could even normal summon Joel Knockbird and then link it off for Spirit with Eyes of Blue. So we really need to be making sure that we're not just thinking about if we're in a bad scenario, right? I think this also leads to players like putting in a random copy of like Mirror Force or Magic Cylinder, some kind of tricky battle trap card like that. Because again, there's this mentality of like, okay, but what if I'm in a really bad spot and what if they're about to swing in for lethal? And then if I have this trap card set up, then I'll be able to get them. But it's like, there are so many ifs. Think about how many times that statement used the word if. If they battle, if I'm behind, if I draw this, if I have it set, and if they don't have a way to negate or stop it, right? You're assuming a lot of things are happening here with the inclusion of that one card. And I think, again, with the stuff like evenly matched and Raigekis here, our opponent is making that deck building misplay. I actually think this even extends to something like Nibiru. Nibiru is not really as great in the current meta as it used to be, because it's only useful after your opponent has set up a certain amount of cards on board. And again, boards are going to be a lot harder to break once those initial pieces are in place. That's why hand traps are pretty much always going to be better. There are some decks that would like to play evenly or Raigeki, but even a lot of going second decks, again, have better options. And if you really want a board breaker and not a hand trap, you still have better options. Cards like Forbidden Droplet. If you don't mind some extra X slots, Super Poly or Fallen of the Virtuous, even Book of Eclipse. And the thing that all these cards have in common is that they're quick play spells, meaning that if you go first, you can set them and potentially use them on your opponent's turn. We really need to value flexibility over power. I understand banishing their whole board face down is super appealing. I totally get that. But at the end of the day, if you play 3 evenly, you're going to banish your opponent's whole board so much less often than if you played like Super Poly and you would fuse away their board. Okay, so now that I've shown you the deck list, let me go ahead and I unfortunately don't have the replay itself saved in Master Duel anymore, but we do have the YouTube video. So we're going to just kind of go through this a little bit with the volume off, of course. Now, I am skipping ahead a little bit. This is from my latest Cool Tune video. If you want to see the whole replay, go ahead there. I'm skipping ahead a little bit to really illustrate the moment when things kind of went wrong for my opponent. They did Ash Blossom the Q, but I had Rotary in hand. Now, once we check their hand with Rotary, yeah, we see they've got the Nibiru, the Raigeki, the evenly matched. They've got all of these cards in hand. And you might be thinking, well, great, they're going second. Like, obviously, that's going to be super helpful, right? Well, no, because I'm on Cool Tune, and obviously I'm able to see all this stuff. Now, of course, you could make the argument that this is, you know, less of a their cards aren't that great here issue, and more of a Cool Tune is broken because I can look at their hand issue. But there's a couple of things that we have to keep in mind with this as well. For one, even aside from our Q manipulating the top cards of our opponent's deck, they were still gonna brick, right? Their top cards were Blue Eyes Jet Dragon, Drill Beam, and then I believe after that is Ash Blossom and Troll. Now, they could have Raigeki'd and summoned a Blue Eyes Jet Dragon, but that's obviously not full combo. It's just like one solid monster to have on board. And as you can see, not only is my opponent like not stopping me from making plays because they have reactive board breakers that are only useful on their turn rather than hand traps, but now because they've tried to jam so many of these kinds of cards into the deck, they've actually put themselves in a scenario where they are bricking more. And yeah, they are able to successfully wipe my board after a couple of negates, even when I do get to see their hand, but without the ability to have any amount of meaningful follow-up, I can just use my follow-up to then secure the game. So I'm not gonna just play through the whole rest of the game because again, I've already shown this on YouTube, but I really wanted to show that hand in particular in this deck as an example because I think it really does illustrate how these highly specific cards that are only good in a scenario where things are going wrong for you are really messing them up. Because like, yeah, again, they went second and they board broke me, sure, but they didn't have enough cards to actually, again, make plays of their own. They weren't planning for things going right. They only accounted for things going wrong. And, well, things went wrong for them, and they still weren't able to bounce back. So, again, really wanted to show that example first. I have some more examples that are from Dual Lives, not myself, so we'll jump into those now. Okay, so the next example that I want to show you is actually from Dual Lives. We're going to take a look at this RB deck list that I found here. But before we start discussing it, again, I want to ask you, what do you think is wrong with this deck list? So really the overarching answer is that there's just too much going on here. We're way above 40 cards, and I don't think we necessarily need to be, right? We're at 48. Now, even though we're at 48 cards, our ratios are still looking pretty decent, right? Ratios that is to hand traps versus one card starters. Obviously, you want hand traps going second. You want the one card starters for when you go first. You also wouldn't mind having some hand traps typically going first as well. So that's why it's important to make sure we have a good ratio. And I think the ratio here is actually pretty decent, right? And I think that's the deck building theory that this person is operating under. If we count the number of hand traps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Not bad. One card starters for RB is pretty much anything that can put 2 machine monsters on the field. So for the one card starters, we got O-Lion, because you can link into Clockwork Knight and then make the token. So that's 3. Scrap Recycler makes 6 for its ability to dump O-Lion. Tether Wolf summons a token on normal summon, so that's going to be 9. I'll count Stage Landing as a starter as well, because it could just pull out something like Brute Blues, which can just add another RB card. And Funk Doc has the ability to search Stage Landing, so that's 12 and then 15. 16 hand traps, 15 one-card starters sounds really impressive, but you also have to consider all of the one-ofs and other engine requirements that we're playing. The RB cards don't typically summon another machine monster, so they're not really one-card starters, but of course, we obviously still need to be playing a critical mass of them. We're also playing some one-ofs like Clockwork Knight and Therion King Regulus, which don't always come up in our combo line, but are still there in case they do. And this, you can kind of see what I mean when I say this person is having a little bit too much all going on at once, right? Again, although it seems counterintuitive, I think they really should cut back on some of these hand traps and some of these starters as well to try to get it down to 40, and that way they're keeping things a little bit more consistent, right? Because although they have a lot of starters and hand traps, a lot of them are actually not going to be useful. For example, Tetherwolf can only get the token when it normal summons, so starters that require your normal summon aren't really ideal, because if you were to open, say, Scrap Recycler and Tetherwolf, or rather O-Lion plus Tetherwolf, you have to choose between normal summoning one of these, and now you don't get a free extender into the other one. Whereas if you opened like Tetherwolf plus Stage Landing, now you can freely normal summon Tetherwolf and then use Stage Landing as an extender. But with this deck count so high and so many of these starters that require a normal summon to get your plays going, they're probably gonna run into that problem a fair bit. Same thing with the hand traps, right? We're playing like 1 Molcharmby Meowls, 1 Ghost Warner, 1 Retaliating Sea. These hand traps that are good in really specific scenarios, well, not really specific, but more specific than something like Ash Blossom or Fua, right? But these kind of hand traps are being played as one-ofs. So like, how often is Duelist B actually gonna find Retaliating Sea against an opponent they really want to use it against, right? In a 48 card list, probably not gonna happen very often. And to kind of counter that point, how often is Duelist B gonna have a hand where their only hand traps are like Retaliating Sea or Meows or like Ghost Spell and Meows, and they're really just like, dang, I wish I had Fuelos right now, which they would have a more better chance of getting if their deck was down to 40 cards. So this is kind of what I'm talking about when I say, even though the ratios here look solid at a glance, when you see how it all comes together, it really could be a lot more efficient. Same with the extra deck, really. I won't comment on that too much, but like, there's really no need for stuff like Tomahawk here. We're only playing 2 level 7 monsters, so are we actually trying to overlay exactly Lambda Blade and Dawn Dragster into Tomahawk to do what? Summon out a bunch of RB Link monsters that we can very easily make already? This is the kind of thing you gotta be thinking about when you're putting cards into your deck. And if we take a glance at Duelist A's deck list, they are on Synchron Elf Note, 60 cards. Their ratios actually look pretty decent here, although I will say they are on a playset of Evenly, which, as we've discussed, is really not a card that's typically ever necessary, especially for a deck like Elf Note Synchron that doesn't inherently care about having spell and trap cards, right? If it were a deck like White Forest, where you could send a spell or trap card to activate effects, or a deck like Labyrinth that really likes having trap cards in general, then you could maybe make more of an argument for Evenly, but I think all things considered, that's a pretty minor quote-unquote deck building sin here. I really just think these Evenly should probably be like Droplet instead or something, but let's go ahead and watch this replay and just see how everything pans out. We're actually going to spectate from Duelist A's perspective, then we'll take a look at Duelist B's perspective to get a full idea of what really happened here. Now, Duelist A is going to go second, and despite playing a 60-card deck, they did actually open a fair amount of hand traps here. I really like that they're firing off Purulia, but not Fulos right away. And it seems that Purulia might have been enough to scare off Duelist B. Or is that what happened? Duelist B is going to fire off their own Purulia here. Now we're going to activate Theo Realize to get our plays going by dumping Medius Sapir. Medius Sapir is going to activate. We're going to put back the Droll and Lockbird in order to summon. Medius will activate, and then Duelist B is firing off the Infinite Impermanence. We're going to chain Junk Signal in order to try to dodge that by tributing Medius Sapir, but they're going to chain Ash Blossom to stop us from summoning off of Junk Signal. But hold on a second. Ash Blossom? Why did they not use that against the Purulia? Maybe it wasn't the Purulia that stopped the plays. In order to gain some more insight onto this, I actually do want to end this replay a little bit early and now spectate from Duelist B's perspective, because I really want to see what exactly is going on here. I suspect I might already know the answer though. Alright, so we're loading into this game and we're going first, but yeah, it looks like we just bricked here. Now, to be fair, we did brick on a bunch of hand traps that we have a decent shot of playing anyway, but this does kind of illustrate the point of why being well above 40 cards can often be at your detriment. Again, I know hands like this are possible even if you are playing exactly 40 cards, but they're a lot more likely when you are over 40. You want to make sure that you are, again, not just thinking about ratios, but also the total deck count, as that will ultimately end up affecting what your hands look like. Because, again, even if you figure, well, the more I increase my main deck size, the more I can simply increase the ratios of hand traps to starters, you gotta figure that you're still gonna be drawing all those extra cards that you're playing in the meantime. Alright, now here we are getting to find the Fulos off of the Purulia draw. We're going a little bit further than we saw from Duelist A's perspective. Looks like Duelist A is making the decision to play through the Fulos here, which I do think is correct, especially because they're making Baron de Fleur as their first extra deck summon. So now, even if Duelist B's got a hugely devastating hand trap like Nibiru or something, then we would still be able to find, lethal here. Now, if we're looking at the cards that Duelist B is top decking here, they've drawn, I believe in this order, Stage Landing, Regulus, Rocket, and then Imperm. So these were the next few cards in their deck. Now they did have Stage Landing as a potential starter, but you also got to remember that Duelist A had quite a few hand traps, including the Purulia and the Fulos and the Droll. Now obviously none of those inherently stopped the Stage Landing, but the Stage Landing would have played right into the Fulos, or if that had been Ash Blossom or something instead, it would have gotten negated by that. My main point here is that although Duelist B did have a starter among these top few cards, it's one that's very easily countered by hand traps, and moreover, if we're paying attention to all these other cards that they've been drawing this whole time, right? They actually still don't really have plays aside from this one Stage Landing. Again, further illustrating this point that they really do need to be watching these ratios. Alright, looks like Duelist A is going to battle here and then use the effect of Rhapsodia to revive the Lucina and then finish off Duelist B. Now, again, Duelist B's hand could have easily happened if they were playing a 40-card deck, given the exact hand traps that they opened, but I do still think that they had a little bit too much going on with their deck, and if they condensed it down to 40 and trimmed some of the fat, which counterintuitively does actually include, I think, removing some starters and hand traps, they would have a lot better opening hands, generally speaking. Okay, so here is one last example from Duel Lives. We're going to take a look at two different deck lists here that are actually of the same deck. It's two Elf Note branded deck lists. Here's Duelist A's list, and then here's Duelist B's. But the list in particular that I really want to focus on here is actually Duelist A's list. Now, once again, I'll ask, do you know what is wrong with this deck list at a glance? This one's a lot more subtle. So I do think that the deck building error here kind of comes down to exactly one card, Spell Canceller. I understand what Duelist A is going for here. Being able to cheat out Spell Canceller onto your board tends to be pretty easy, right? Particularly, I believe they do it with the Albion Sanctifier here. But while that can be easy to pull off if you do your turn 1 combo line and play it all out, I think that is very much win more. What does win more mean? Well, it means that it's a card that is only going to see play or be useful when you're already in a winning position, right? If Branded Elf Note is comboing off to a point where they're able to actually summon out the Spell Canceller, that means the whole rest of their combo line had to have played out, and basically things had to have gone very right for them. So you don't really need to have Spell Canceller. I mean, obviously being able to negate all spell cards is really, really good. However, at the point where you've achieved the Spell Canceller board, you're probably just going to be able to negate or play through anything your opponent can do anyway. So what ends up happening is that rather than using Spell Canceller, every time you go first and combo off, your opponent's probably going to concede before it even hits the board, or it's not going to contribute to the board winning. And on top of that, you'll be drawing it in a lot of games where you really don't want to see it in your opening hand. At that point, even if Spell Canceller is being summoned to your turn 1 combo board very often, it's still doing more harm the one game you brick by drawing it than all of those games that you actually put it on the board. I do think there's a little bit of unnecessary extra deck stuff happening here too, like Clearwing, Synchro Dragon, and Junora, but I think that's relatively minor compared to the Spell Canceller here. Okay, so we're going to take a look at this mirror match here. Again, Duelist B has almost the exact same list. It's the same, branded Elf Note deck, but their extra decks obviously a little bit different, and they are not on the Spell Canceller. So we're watching from Duelist A's perspective, and they did end up kind of breaking here. I mean, they don't have any starters, but they do have a couple of Fueloses going to Duelist B's turn 1. Duelist B going to begin with the Elf Note Tinea, placing the Welcome Home. They're activating Welcome Home, triggering the Tinea, and Duelist A is going to activate Ghost Ogre. This was a huge misplay. This was a massive misplay. Now, granted, this is less of a deck building misplay and more of a gameplay one, but you've already shot off a Fuelos. You've got a second in hand, and more importantly, you have no plays. You have no starters here. I think you absolutely just chain the second Fuelos to the Welcome Home rather than stopping it with the Ghost Ogre, because now what's probably going to end up happening is Duelist B is going to just kind of end their turn. Yep, and now Duelist A doesn't have any plays, unless they top deck one. Now they got stupid unlucky. I don't even know how astronomically low the odds of having all 3 copies of the Fallen and the Virtuous are here, but again, they would have much rather have had those Fuelos draws. Alright, looks like they're going to use Fallen and the Virtuous against the Elf Note Tinea. Duelist B activating a second Welcome Home, which Duelist A can now chain Fuelos to. This is like the one scenario where holding the Fuelos and using Ghost Ogre earlier was better, but this scenario still involved our opponent, or Duelist A rather, not having any draws here. And as you can see, Duelist A is really still struggling to find plays. Duelist B going into the Baron de Fleur. Now there's an Elf Note Tinea that's finally plays, but I think that's coming a little bit too late here, as Duelist B is going to add back the Elf Note Regina. They're also going to activate the Power Patron in order to add Lucina. Now they can special summon Lucina. Lucina effect can add the Fortuna. They can send away the Lucina for Regina, actually not putting it in the center so they can put Fortuna in the center and set up the Rhapsidia. And that's the thing too, right? You could have used Ghost Ogre against the Rhapsidia and avoided being OTK'd, or, in the more in line with the turn 1 combo line, you still could have stopped their plays while gaining draws off of Fuelos. But as we saw, this is a kind of deck, branded Elf Note, that's already bricky enough, and while Duelist A did not specifically brick by drawing Spell Canceller, they did have a really bricky hand, and the Fuelos draws, the initial ones, were even more bricks. The Tinea, even if the double Fuelos had gotten off, there's a chance that Duelist A would not have even found the Tinea in time. Now, again, obviously Spell Canceller wasn't here, but you can see how Spell Canceller is not helping scenarios like this. You really can't afford to be playing these, sort of win more bricky cards. I know earlier I talked about, you should plan for things going right and not things going wrong, but there is an extreme end case where you can plan for things going right way too much, and then as a result, you aren't prepared when things go wrong. It really does ultimately require a balance. Okay, that's going to end up doing it for this one. I really hope that you found this kind of video helpful. I've made videos sort of like this in the past, just talking about like deck building theory, but I haven't done one in quite this format yet where we see some example games as well. So let me know what you think in the comments below of this video, this style of video. If you want to see more topics like this, feel free to leave some of those in the comments too. Things that you want to know about that are more general gameplay as opposed to like covering a specific deck. And I would love to come back to this format at some point in the future, but really do just want to thank each and every one of you for watching all the way to the very end of the video. That does mean a lot, and it really helps smaller YouTube channels like my own. But again, we also have to give extra special thanks to our YouTube members and Patreon subscribers in the end credits. So let's go ahead and do that now. Hey everybody, Hexlex here. Thank you so very much for watching all the way to the very end of the video, which by the way is one of the best ways to support the channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, take a look at the names on screen. These are folks who have been so generous as to either join as a YouTube member or subscribe over on patreon.com/Hexlex to support. There's also perks for doing so. If you would like to see YouTube videos early, as well as some exclusive videos that get uploaded to YouTube, but for one reason or another I decide not to publish, definitely go ahead and hit that join button to see content early, as well as some exclusive content. If you're looking for more exclusive content, over on patreon.com, I upload exclusive videos that are not posted on YouTube just about every single day. Whether you choose to subscribe over on Patreon, join as a YouTube member, or simply continue to watch, your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so very much. But for now, this is Hexlex. I am signing out, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.